morning. I'd like to call the Tuesday, April 9th, 2024 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda for the Tuesday, April 9th, 2024 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Doblinger.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Mueller to approve this evening's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item 3, approval of minutes, 3.1. Is the approval of the March 26, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes. Is there any additions or corrections to this? Hearing none, does anybody have any questions regarding the minutes? With no questions, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the March 26, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mueller
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Wooten to approve the March 26, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to new business, item 4.1 is the Opportunity Housing Ordinance Housing Study Resolution authorizing application to Livable Communities Demonstration Account funding. May we have the staff report?
Thank you, Chair William, Commissioners. I think I told you I'd be back soon, and here I am. So this item is a resolution relating to the authorization to apply and execute grant agreements related to one of the LCDA funding opportunities, which is the Policy Development Fund. So this is an opportunity that staff have identified as appropriate for going toward the cost of a renewed housing nexus study, which would inform our opportunity housing ordinance. So as I've been in here and have talked about, our Opportunity Housing Ordinance was established in part with consultation through a Housing Nexus study that we contracted from actually 2 organizations, Daedalus Advisory Services and BAE Urban Economics, and that was back in 2019 and into 2019. So those results were used to set that basis for the affordability requirement, so that's that 9% at 60% AMI, as well as there was a lot of back and forth to develop the incentives that the OHO has. So that original study cost was over $100,000. So not a low cost. So staff have been looking for funding opportunities to cover some of that cost. That Housing Nexus study, when it was made back in 2018-19, was to have a relevant lifespan of 5 years. So we're going to reach the end of that at the end of 2024, so we'd want to renew prior to that. The HRA also periodically contracts for comprehensive housing needs analyses, typically every 4 to 7 years. And those reports are used, they're required by HUD, and they're also necessary to inform some of the other programs that the HRA administers, such as our CDBG program, and it can inform our HRA admin plan. So one thought that staff have put forward is that some of these reports can be bundled, and this could potentially save cost. So that would go out as a bundled RFP for a housing nexus study and a housing needs analysis, and we would look for applications from these organizations to execute that. So that's down the road. What we're considering tonight is funding to help cover that cost. So staff are recommending that this Livable Communities Demonstration Account Policy Development Funding, which is through the Metropolitan Council, is a suitable opportunity for the Housing Nexus study. That is grant funding for up to $50,000. It's capped by city at $50,000. And it's stated that the policy development program is to support locally adopted policies that emphasize equitable development. So we see that as a good match to the goals of the OHO. Potential outcomes from this renewed study would be a change to that base affordability requirement, that 9%, or perhaps a change to what that affordability level is, that 60% AMI. And if there are any changes, we would want those to align with our goals. So that would be the metropolitan council's housing needs analysis or the BTT goals and how those align with housing, and then any other goals that relate to housing. So we'd want to ensure that outcomes from this study are making sure that the work we're doing is achieving on those goals. So just to give you that background, the item before you is to allow for staff to complete that application, which has a deadline of April 22nd.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, I do have one question. When reading this motion, that 2024- that gets filled in later, correct?
Thank you, Chair Huhim. Yes, correct. You can just say to adopt a resolution.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. With no questions, we'd be looking for a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing application and authorizing the execution of a grant agreement for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account funding.
Motion to adopt.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Mueller to adopt a resolution authorizing application and authorizing the execution of a grant agreement for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account funding. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to new business item 4.2 is the Bloomington Affordable Home Ownership Program. May we have the staff report?
Thank you, Chair Huhim. Erica Coleman. So I am bringing before you some guidelines to consider for this program as we are moving forward in this process. So just to ground us in the background of where we've been and where we are, on the March 26th, the last meeting, the HRA Board did approve entering into a grant agreement with Minnesota Housing for the Community Homeownership Impact Fund Award for the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program. This is the funding in which the HRA applied for to Minnesota Housing Finance Agency and was awarded through a competitive process of $3,199,500 for a grant period of April 1st, 2024 through March 31st, 2027. And so the funding is available as value gap, which is the difference between the cost of construction of a home and the cost to an affordable home buyer. For new construction of 27 homes, but it's on a project-by-project basis. As we explained before, this is steps that have to be taken where we would draw the funds during the process. And so there's steps of approval and checks and balances along the way. So we're not going to see a transfer of $3,199,500 to the HRA from Minnesota Housing. It is the project-by-project basis. And so a little bit about that program. It's the fund does align, the Community Homeownership Impact Fund Award does align with the HRA's programs and services, and specifically under our residential development and services work with the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program, which I just have abbreviated as BAH for short. And so this program purpose is to create new construction affordable homeownership opportunities for in-home buyers at or below 80% AMI. It also has a priority to work with small, emerging, and or historically underutilized and underrepresented developers. And lastly, to preserve long-term affordability, which is 15 years of affordability. And so those three main areas are the priorities or the goals coming out of this program that do align with BTT, Bloomington Tomorrow Together, that touch on housing and economic development goals and priorities as the city has outlined. And so to support the developers and the success of this program and outcomes of the HRA, I'm looking to work with strategic partners to provide technical assistance and construction financing for small, emerging, historically underutilized and or underrepresented developers. And so I would be looking to do a professional services agreement with roles and responsibilities and outcomes identified between the HRA and each strategic partner, as they would guide the relationship, and the reporting required to know what is happening and how is this working along our goals and priorities. And so the following nonprofit entities have been identified as relevant subject matter experts with capacity and programs assisting developers. So LISC Twin Cities, LISC stands for Local Initiative Support Corporation. They actually are a national organization that have chapters in different communities. And so this would be LISC Twin Cities. And what you have in your packet is actually an outline of their program description and information that they currently have. The second one is Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. We do call them GMHF for short. GMHF actually has, it's more so on their webpage, in which I did provide a hyperlink in the posted agenda. And so you can click on that. It doesn't come through necessarily on your printout. So I did add that. And GMHF's program, as I've been in conversation with them, does include technical assistance as well as potential funding opportunities. And I bring that up. Each of these identified include potential funding opportunities for small, emerging, historically underutilized or underrepresented developers, because that is a key piece in terms of the development construction cost. We are only coming in with a certain amount in terms of that project gap. There's still a whole amount that they would probably need to get interim construction financing for, and so they need to have that technical assistance and understanding of that. And so GMHF actually provides program design, construction lending, and technical assistance. What we want to make sure of in working with different strategic partners is that they have the capacity. So that is why I'm not proposing one entity. I'm proposing multiple entities. Part of that also is that they have relationships already with developers that fit these classes or groups, as well as it's just growing our relationships and these entities who have not done a lot of things, if anything yet, in Bloomington, allowing them to have that opportunity as well. These may not be the only entities that we work with, but these are the three that have had conversations with and come forward first. The last one is Land Bank Twin Cities. This is also an entity that actually serves the 7-county metro, but has really done a lot in just Minneapolis and St. Paul, but they're not precluded from doing anything outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and so really working with them, but they do also offer interim construction financing. And so that's where these entities come from. There are other entities that may not be nonprofit, but they are mission-based organizations that work with developers, as well as Urban Land Institute Minnesota that has programs for developers or new developers and making sure that they are connected with proper assistance. So in this, I'm looking for you all to review and approve the guidelines this evening, but I wanted to discuss the process of this piece of the program because it's so important. That I would want to enter into strategic partnerships, like I said, professional services agreements, to not exceed the amount of my authority as HRA administrator. However, if you would like that to come back before you for approval, we can do that as well, so we can just better spell out how we're going about it. But this is what I wanted to discuss with you. And so in that, we can get to the guidelines. And the way the guidelines are written, which are in your packet, are to provide that one, they can be public facing, because we want people to know what they are looking at, whether they are a potential home buyer and or the potential developer. So it gives the program summary, but then it gives who an eligible program developer participant would be. And because I'm looking to use strategic partners, they would have to be referred by a developer program technical assistance provider such as LISC Twin Cities, Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, Urban Land Institute Real Estate Diversity Initiative, and or Land Bank Twin Cities. And so that it would be written into the program guidelines because we want to know they're coming with help and support in working with this program. And then they would also need to demonstrate that a development team that includes a developer or general contractor with experience performing a comparable scale of real estate development within the last 2 years. What that means is building a single-family home and or a two-family home within the last 2 years. they need to have somebody on their team that would be able to sign off on things that has done that. Eligible project and property. This is from the funding. A lot of this comes from the funding. So units to be constructed will either be a 1 or 2 unit structure. That's all it's going to be for owner occupancy. So there is no option to rent out these properties that we would be assisting to include. Only land made available by the HRA will be considered for a project. So this will not have the opportunity for someone to be able to purchase a lot from a private owner and then bring that lot into the program. It's only land purchased, only land made available by the HRA. Also, the newly constructed unit must meet the planning and zoning requirements, building code, and incorporate required enterprise green communities, visitability, and be a qualified dwelling unit as defined by Minnesota Housing in the Impact Fund Procedural Manual. Then we get into the eligible value gap. This is the funding that we are using from Minnesota Housing, of which it's up to $118,500. And these are the costs that would be eligible when they put together their pro forma and their proposal for what they want to build and where the funding is coming from and what the end result is, which it would have to come before the HRA board when we look to approve disposing of that HRA-owned land. So before you're making that decision to consider how to convey that lot to that developer, you're looking at the whole picture and you're making sure it did go through the proper entitlement processes with planning and zoning, and that this would be a project that would be good to go. Because we want to have approval when they're ready, when they would be ready to start construction, because we also are on a timeline for our funding. So that's why this is written that way. And then we have the value gap terms and security. This is very important because we would be looking to put a deed restriction on the property, because this is how we do that is that we record it against the property that we provided this funding, and this is how we expect the property to remain affordable for 15 years. And so that's securing what that is. And then the construction, completion, and sale. And so the reason I added this, because I think it's important that they know going in what we expect when the property is completed. So 1, they must affirmatively market for sale housing opportunities created by the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program by ensuring housing opportunities are publicly posted for sale on the multiple listing service for a minimum of 10 calendar days, agreeing to a public posting on the HRA's website of the applicant's contact information and development project address through the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program, including non-discrimination, equal housing opportunity language on all MLS postings and marketing materials. We would like to start seeing signage at the site. So providing signage in weatherproof materials with professional lettering of a minimum size of 2 feet by 3 feet on the project site that includes the HRA logo and states this project is being developed with the assistance and cooperation of the Bloomington HRA. Right? And so then there can be exceptions to the MLS posting that would be approved by the HRA in our sole discretion as the HRA for home sale models that are affirmatively marketed, have a waiting list, and demonstrate outreach to underserved markets. Then that could be a waiver process for not posting on the MLS. And then what I wanted to add was the eligible home buyer criteria. And this is the criteria that really comes from the funding. The household must occupy the eligible property as its principal residence. The owner occupy the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Unit as their principal residence. I repeated it, sorry. Meet HUD Part 5 income eligibility requirements. This is how we calculate income. It's called HUD Part 5. So this is looking at earned and unearned income of how we're saying, yes, this household has not exceeded the limits. Be 18 years of age or older, or have been declared emancipated by a court having jurisdiction. They do need to complete an 8-hour pre-purchase homebuyer education workshop offered by a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. This actually just needs to be completed within 12 months of closing. So if they completed it in January and they close in December, they're fine. But if they completed it in January and they're looking to close February, they might have to do the class again. And that's just the rules of that certification. And then last, utilize a first mortgage product that is considered an A or prime lending product. So it must be a fixed rate FHA, VA, or conventional loan unless pre-approved by Bloomington Affordable Homeownership staff. And what that gets to is just we don't want to see subprime lending, which has been used as a predatory tool in the past. And then lastly, I thought it was beneficial to add where the income limits lie. And this is based on what Minnesota Housing's chart has already provided. So I did add that this is as of June 2023, so it is subject to change. But 80% AMI for the 11-county Twin Cities Metro, in which Bloomington would fall, is $100,000. And so it's being very clear of what the cap is for 80% AMI. And so I can stand for any questions or discussion about all of that.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Wooten.
Clarification, actually. So if we approve these guidelines tonight, does that mean every time you make a choice to add somebody different, you have to come back here, or you don't have to come back here?
Thank you for the question, Chair Huhim and Commissioner Wooten. I would feel better if I was looking to add somebody different, that I would come back and just communicate with you all and provide that information. Part of that is we have not worked with these entities in this capacity before. And so this is also providing the information for people to even know that these entities exist and to start looking into what other things may be offered or provided, but they all can work in Bloomington.
Yeah, my question was primarily for fluidity and consistency and not trying to impede the process. So thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Mueller.
So who is responsible? You say it has to be on MLS for 10. Is the builder responsible for marketing the house? Is that?
Thank you, Chair Huhim and Commissioner Mueller. So yes, it's the developer's responsibility. So we would actually enter into an agreement with each developer on a project-by-project basis that would also include some of this information. And so whoever we enter into the agreement with is overall the responsible party. But I do want to say that it is up to them to make sure that it is posted on the multiple listing service and or apply for a waiver, because they're saying we're going to do it this way and we can show that we're still meeting those needs if we do it this way. And so sometimes affirmative marketing could also include specific mailers to a certain area within the property. It can include posting in certain papers, culturally specific papers or different articles or publications. It can include different groups. So there are different affinity groups that are within the real estate professional sphere. It can include doing that. It can also include the same technical assistance providers may have also a pipeline and information and be able to post for people to know that these properties are available. These properties would be available broadly. And so, for instance, we have done things with built relationship with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, who has a lending, like a lending side. Those home buyers that come through that program, there's nothing stopping them from being able to purchase one of these homes. Mm-hmm. And so also it's being able to leverage that network through this ecosystem of saying, we know that there are other entities and other groups that are already working within the demographic of affordable home buyers at 80% AMI or below. Let's make sure they know these properties are coming available. So those are different types of things that can happen. But yes, it is going to be on the developer or whoever we enter into that agreement with. And I just want to say the reason for that is because we want to allow for the opportunity for small, emerging, historically underutilized, underrepresented developers to work in Bloomington, but we don't want them to work in Bloomington and then because we did something, the way we did something, it precludes them from working in another community because that community may do it differently. So what I'm proposing here is very similar to what Minneapolis and St. Paul do when they have programs like this, and helping people learn how to work with government in different areas, which the whole goal, if you're going to work with government, is creating affordable housing opportunities. So these same developers will get some of that to learn how to do this in other communities.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. When we're talking about the developers, are we limiting like the number of developers, or are we saying you can only do one property? Like, what are we restricting any of that, or is that kind of just to be seen of what happens going forward?
Thank you for the question, Chair Huhim. That is to be seen as going forward. I can probably name about 8 to 10 developers right now that should be able to, if they have capacity and the opportunity for funding, should be able to do this. However, I don't want to restrict it because there might not be 27 developers to build 27 homes, or there might be 1 or 2 that can do multiples. But the focus is we work with West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. We work with Habitat for Humanity. We work with other nonprofit entities that develop. This is not necessarily just for them. This is to try and reach others, and if those nonprofit developers want to come. Now, these cannot be land trust properties. That is one thing that I'm not proposing in this program, because we work with land trust on other projects, that these 27 will not be land trust. However, if those nonprofit developers want to work with general contractors or others on their team that meet small, emerging, historically underutilized, underrepresented, great. We still can meet all those goals. So I don't want to limit it. I want to see how it goes. It is a 3-year grant agreement, and so let's see how we're doing on this, since it's the first time we're doing this here in Bloomington. And then there was something that had just come to mind, and then it slipped my mind. So that'll probably come back to me in just a second. So that is the opportunity that exists here that we would like to keep. I know what it was. Yeah. On any lot that can, any lot that meets the requirements for a 2-unit, we will require a 2-unit.
Okay.
And so what that will ultimately look like is staff will probably start to split those lots now, because we want to maximize the opportunity and the density and align with what the city has already put in place. So if there's a lot that's big enough to hold a 2-unit and meet the setbacks and everything, we're not going to allow a single family home to be built. It will have to be 2 units that either are shared wall, or two separate units. They both will have to be sold for homeowner occupancy. So technically, that's 2 projects. Mm-hmm. That would be 2 projects technically. So one developer could do that, and that's 2 projects. And it would make sense that one developer would do that when the lots are right next to each other. So I did want to offer that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? With no other questions, we'd be looking for a motion to approve Bloomington Affordable Home Ownership Program guidelines.
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten and a second by Commissioner Doblinger to approve the Bloomington Affordable Home Ownership Program guidelines. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to discussion items, item 5.1 is HRA Board Policy and Issues Update. May we have the staff report?
Thank you, Chair Huhim. So I just wanted to remind again that the Bloomington Home Fair is coming. It actually is next Saturday, not this Saturday, next Saturday. So it will be before our next meeting. So I do want to announce that again. And then lastly, we are just looking at internal capacity and staffing that is available within our already existing allotted capacity. So we may see a couple new faces at our next meeting or shortly after there. So I just wanted to let you know that we have identified different opportunities there to meet the needs of the HRA, which also includes the roles and responsibilities for this Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program, reporting and compliance. And so those are my issue updates at this time.
Wonderful. Is there any questions? Hearing no questions, any discussion? Anything?
I'm just excited.
That is a great discussion, right?
Just excited.
Yeah.
See the growth,
Oh.
see the vision,
Mm-hmm.
The effort by staff.
Yeah.
It's a good time to be in.
Yeah. Commissioner Issei.
So this is about the Developers of Color Capacity Building Initiative. So I see that this is the 2021 and 2022 cohorts. Is this something that's still ongoing, or is it kind of an initiative that happened those 2 years and then was just put on pause or ended?
Thank you, Chair Huhim and Commissioner Issei. So yes, you're looking at what LISC Twin Cities provided me. And so they actually started this program in particular in 2021. But yes, it's ongoing. I had asked them for more information, just so that you all had some information. One of the things about this program in particular, this is just showing you that they have capacity to do programs like what we're asking. One of the things about this program in particular is that they do require for this program participants to have site control. And so either site control is that either they own the property or they have it under agreement to enter into this type of initiative and cohort model. But this was just to show that they have these opportunities. But yes, it is ongoing. And they have separately received funding to make sure this continues, that they do it every year.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'd be moving on to adjournment and looking for a motion to adjourn the Tuesday, April 9th, 2024 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting. We have a motion by Commissioner Doblinger
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Mueller to adjourn the Tuesday, April 9th, 2024 HRA meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.